I'm Josh Lee. Here is a lightning talk that I would like to share with you called the Open Source Hero's Journey. And first, just some credit to my former colleagues, Edwin Anatu and Henning Trau, who sort of helped me originally formulate the idea for this talk. When we first did it, we spent an hour talking about open telemetry. Today, I'm going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes talking about all open source projects. So with that, let's dive in. So first, any story, any adventure, right, starts with the call to adventure. And those of us who work in open source tooling, as Heather kind of explained with her excellent car metaphor, right, we take the path less traveled. We take what is usually a rougher, darker, less trodden path, less paved path, if you want to borrow some terms from SRE, right? And that is the beginning of our journey. And on a journey, right, we can break down journeys and stories using Joseph Campbell's story circle, which originally had like 23 steps. There are a simplified version of it that you might be familiar with 12 steps. And I really like this 8-step version from Dan Harmon that just sort of simplifies it down into single words. So we'll break this all down and kind of bring it back to software. But starting out, right, we're comfortable. We have everything that we need. Everything is great. Until something happens, right? There's some new feature we need to implement or requirement that we need to deal with. We need something. This is our call to action. This is what causes us to go out into the unknown and seek new tools and new knowledge. So we cross the threshold into the unknown, right? We need to maybe go past just reading the documentation or reading about a project and actually like install it or Docker compose up or Helm install, right? Get the thing going for the first time. And this is when we actually fully cross into that unknown territory, right? You kind of break down the story circle. The top half is the familiar. The bottom half is the unknown. We will eventually return to the familiar, but we have some steps to take before we get there. So we've entered the unfamiliar. We've taken our first steps. And we face some challenges, right? Everything isn't just hunky-dory. And we need maybe some help. So that help can come in a lot of forms, but the one I like the best is meeting allies and mentors, right? We kind of form a team, and together with the aid of our team, we are then able to face those challenges and find success, right? So we adapt, we find our allies, whatever form that takes. And we find victory, right? We have our first early victory, the magical forest. And now everything is great, right? We've got things working in a POC, and we've maybe got some real data flowing into it. This is great. But oh no, now we need to like integrate this with our other systems. And our reward becomes a valley of despair, right? So the journey has its trials and its tribulations. We might kind of repeat this a few times depending on the specific journey that we're on. But ultimately, what will happen is we'll find our reward, we'll pay our price, and then we will return home, having gained some new knowledge or having changed in some way. I think in the case of open source software, right, it's those new skills and knowledge that we've acquired on the journey. So this kind of follows, like you might have seen this in your English classes, right, in high school. There's this map or graph of the actual excitement in a story. And we kind of have this initial rising action and resolution, and then the final climax, peak action, and then the final resolution. In my high school English classes, we actually learned an extended version of this that my teacher called the Witch's Hat. And I think the Lord of the Rings books, not the movies, have the great example of this, right, in when the hobbits return home to the Shire, and there's a final battle with Saruman. So we're kind of applying the knowledge and skills that we've accumulated in the first 2 parts of the journey and demonstrating them in the final part of the journey. But that doesn't really fit into the metaphor that I'm making today. So we'll go back to the simplified hero's journey here. And if we look at this maybe sideways a little bit, it might look kind of similar to something else, right? It might look kind of like this. And maybe you're already like on the edge of your seat. You know what this is. You know what's coming next. Maybe you're not. If you haven't quite got it, here, let me help you out. It's this, right? It's the Gartner Hype Cycle. So for those not familiar, right, this tracks the progress that individual technologies take on their journey to being sort of adopted productively by organizations. So we as developers go on these journeys when we're adopting new technologies, but the technologies themselves also flow through this journey. They start with an innovation trigger, some problem that the technology solves or some need that needs to be addressed. Everybody gets really, really excited about it. I'm sure you can think of some things that might be in the peak of inflated expectations right now, maybe about to fall into the trough of disillusionment. And then we have the trough of disillusionment, where we've all tried the thing. It didn't quite live up to all of that overhyped promises. And we're all a little bit bummed, right? But then we kind of figure out, like, okay, we probably had too high of expectations. If we recalibrate, we learn a little bit about how to interact with the tool, engage with the tool, and apply it correctly. And we eventually reach the plateau of productivity. So this kind of maps right here. Here it is back in my sort of low fidelity version. This kind of maps to that journey that the heroes take, right? From the familiar into the unknown, gaining that new knowledge, going through the valley of despair or the trough of disillusionment, and then finally returning home to where we were before, but with new knowledge and new tools that we can apply productively. So here's kind of how it maps out, right? We've got our go, find, take, and change. Um, and so that's the open source hero's journey, right? We go through all of these steps. At the end, we have newfound knowledge that can allow us to triumph over new challenges and fantastic forces. We can share that knowledge with others. We can become the ally that originally helped us in our journey, right? And we can learn and grow together as a community with open source in ways that we simply cannot with proprietary technologies. I think that's awesome. And that's the story, at least until we set out again for the next adventure.